let's talk about can the Batman start a new DCEU? So we're gonna have a little debate here. Um, but let me kind of set the table first. So this came up on social media. I was kind of like checking out, what's trending as I do, looking for stories for quick hits and whatnot throughout the week. And one of the things that was like a theme over the course of the week was the Batman as a movie. Can it be like a foundation and the starting point of a new DCEU, similar to how Man of Steel kicked off the current DCEU? Can the Batman sort of do that and then maybe do a fresh start, just do over, whatever you want to call it? So Roland, I guess let's start there. I mean, what do you think about that idea as in general? And then we will dive into the pros and cons of it too. But I just want to start by asking you, do you think the Batman can start a new DCU? Do you think it's a good idea?
Uh, Two different things. One, I think they can absolutely do it. I think if they spend enough time and dedication, they can do anything. And especially with all the positive feedback that they got from the Batman, I think it's very easy for them to go back in this very grunge world and go with this honestly a quite different version of gritty that Zack Snyder was trying to create and kind of bring these centered out of these world beings to the screen. I think they can absolutely do it. And it would be really cool to see the twist that they would have on all these iconic characters. Now, whether or not they should do it is a different question. Personally, I know we had some quite different opinions of the Batman than a lot of the general audience did. But
I mean, I actually changed my opinion because after I watched it at home, like I watched it once in theaters and then I watched it at home
yeah,
later. And the second time I watched it, I was thinking a lot less about, let's say The Dark Knight and how it compares to that masterpiece, and much more on like judging it on its own merits. And I think I had a much better time with it. And I think it's honestly a fantastic movie and in my opinion, probably one of the top 2 or 3 movies of the year so far. Maybe it might actually be. Well, no, I think Top Gun for me is my favorite, but it's up
I
there.
was gonna say,
Yeah. No, but you continue. My opinion on it has improved since my first viewing. I don't know about you though.
I saw it once in theaters, and I kind of rewatched some clips, and I did watch some breakdowns before and after we did the taping, and I liked a lot of aspects of it. And I will always say that I will always try to keep a little optimism whenever I do a review. There's definitely some really cool things that I love with it. For example, I love a good emo Bruce Wayne. That I feel like that's a very important part to the Batman lore that not everybody necessarily follows. But they went for it. You looked at that guy and you're like, oh yeah, he was sad. He listened to MCR like all the time in high school. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like,
Oh yeah, no, he had this like emo rock star sort of a vibe, and I think it's Robert Pattinson said he was getting inspiration from what's the I think was he the lead singer in Kiss or because
Gene Simmons.
Keith Richards, is that it? Or
Keith
the Rolling Stones?
Richards is
Am I
oh
connecting the
gosh,
wrong
that's
dots
Rolling
here?
Stones, I believe.
But
Yeah,
am I on the right am I on the right track there or no? No.
well, I mean, he's the guitarist for Rolling Stones, but
Oh, Rolling Stones.
he's
Yeah,
definitely like he's a rocker. Yeah.
right. I think like Rob Pattinson said that's kind of what he was going um that's what he was going for. So um but yeah, I mean the question so I mean people have different opinions about the movie. I think by and large a lot of people liked it. It made more than $750 million at the box office, so clearly it was a hit.
Of
And
course. Yeah.
they've commissioned a sequel at this point. I don't think they've officially greenlit it, but Matt Reeves has been working on a new script. Robert Pattinson's on board. They brought out both the director, I mean, and Pattinson and Reeves came out and talked about it um, at CinemaCon earlier this year. We know that the Penguin show on HBO Max is still going ahead. Matt Reeves
Oh
just
yeah, I
signed
forgot
a
about
new
that.
over yeah, and then Matt Reeves just signed a new overall deal with Warner Brothers. So he's going to be working with them for a long time to come, and obviously a big part of that time is going to be spent working on this franchise. So naturally, you got to wonder. I mean, they're going to continue to make projects within the world of the Batman. and not only
Yeah.
movies, but obviously other TV shows and other tie-in properties as well. So if you were to bring in like superpowered heroes like Superman or a Wonder Woman or a Flash or a Green Lantern or Aquaman or Cyborg or the Martian Manhunter, or Shazam, Black Adam, those kind of characters, they all have these superhuman abilities. Some of them like supernatural tinge, some of them feel very sci-fi-ish, some of them feel more mythical, god, demigod-like things. But the world that we have seen in this movie that's been created by the Batman, can those superpowered heroes work in the Matt Reeves world that he has made, and for this very grounded, gritty, dark world where, like, the character of the Riddler was a serial killer, and a very intimidating one at that, because of how close to reality he hit sometimes with like the way they
Yeah.
portrayed him. And Paul Dano obviously was a great actor, but the question that I have for you obviously is, can you take that world and then integrate a Superman or a Zod, like those kind of superpowered beings into it?
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely not an easy task to do, since a big part of this, the selling point of the Batman was that it was realistic. I mean, it wasn't
It
necessarily
was a bit
realistic. I mean,
stylized.
this guy, does the flying squirrel suit and hits a bridge and then a truck and then falls off and then he's completely unharmed. I don't know how realistic that is.
He sort of
Personally,
limped away, but
he
still,
limped
like,
away and then never talks about it again.
that's fair.
But they can absolutely do this. I think that's what the plan was always for, the previous DCEU. That was the whole point of, having Superman really question his morality, and why everybody was like, oh, well, I think if Warner Brothers is smart, and I'm not saying anything about that, they will
They've got a
learn
new
from
ownership, you know.
yeah, I think they will learn from all the viewership, all the positive and negative feedback that they've gone over the years, because a lot of their marketing has just been like, just risk it and see how it works out, or trying to work with what they think that the audience wants. And then turns out that the audience didn't want that in the first place. They actually wanted the original idea. So I think they're smart. They'll listen to the audience like they should have been years ago, and saying, all right, well, this really worked when we did this. We really worked when we did this. And if they're going to build another DCEU, then honestly, the Batman is probably your best bet to start. I'm just going to say it. I have my opinion on it, but I think they're absolutely right. I mean, this is a really good world building, and I can see this world ever expanding.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna come at it from two angles. I think there's both a downside and an upside to doing this. And by doing this, I mean, of course, having the Batman be the foundation for a new shared DC universe, whatever you want to call it. We're gonna call it DCEU, or the worlds of DC, or whatever they call it, behind the scenes of Warner Brothers.
NDCEU, new DCEU.
Ah, look at that. One more letter to an ever
Yes.
expanding abbreviation. So, um, there's to me, there's the upside to this would be, obviously you've got this hit property, which its first iteration performed better than Man of Steel did. It was far
Mhm.
less divisive than Man of Steel was. So you all of a sudden have all the positive word of mouth and the good omens that come from that. Not to mention everything else that's already in development for this universe already. The one concern that a lot of people tend to bring up is, oh, well, how can you ground those characters like Superman and everything in there? I'm like, well, did you watch Man of Steel? That movie was basically a alien first contact story that to me felt like about as grounded a story as you can ever really truly do with a Superman character. I know in the third act things get crazy in terms of the action and the skill and the scope of destruction, but if you want to portray the true power of Superman, if you were to get in a fight with another superpowered human being or human-like being like Zod, then of course they would destroy buildings and blow up trains and cause the kind of damage that they did, because you're either going to show them at that level of power or you're not. Like you power them down and they're not quite as super as we want them to be or would like for them to be. So I still think the realism and how it grounded the story worked well in Man of Steel. I'm a big fan of the movie. I know a lot of people probably weren't. It didn't get a positive reception for the most part, or it was mixed, and it still made plenty of money, like made almost $700 million. But
Yeah.
just like how they brought Batman into that world, I think you can bring Superman into this world. It will be a little more difficult if you were to like do the same thing with like a Martian Manhunter or a Wonder Woman. I still think actually Martian Manhunter can work really well, and I really, really wish, it's been the law for the longest time, I really wish that somebody would make a good Martian Manhunter movie, because I think that character, when done right in live action, can provide so much mythology for you to mine. Like, I think if you watch
Yeah.
that movie John Carter, that did flop pretty hard for Disney, and you apply the same kind of like fundamental like production design and like how they kind of went about telling that story to a Martian
Yeah.
Manhunter, but obviously with his mythology, you know, John Carter on a fundamental storytelling perspective worked as a movie. It just wasn't marketed well and nobody went to see it and it just, you know, bombed.
Yeah.
And then, you know, Disney buried it as hard as they could because they wanted to look as amenable to George Lucas to buy Star Wars as they possibly could. So they didn't want like a John Carter kind of competing with that at the same time. But the point being, I do believe that you could bring in those other characters. Like, for example, in the current DCU, we have seen things like the Suicide Squad, which, for all of its crazy supernatural elements, it did feel grounded for a lot of like the military aspects of it. Even the new Shazam movies, the Black Adam movies, you do feel like they're grounded in a certain element of reality. You know, Aquaman was
Yeah.
probably the most fantastical movie they've done in the DCU to this point, and maybe the Flash will up the ante on that. But I still feel like both those movies will try to ground themselves in some form of reality because they still have to exist with that same world that the Man of Steel was based in, that Batman v Superman was based in, that even a
Yeah.
Birds of Prey was based in, and Birds of Prey was, you know, much more of a low budget, you know, on the ground kind of a down and dirty film. So I think it can work. Now, where it I think is a bad idea has everything to do with the fact that I think the current DCEU, they've got way too much invested in there. Like, they've got 4 new movies all in that same continuity coming out next year. You've got yeah, I think you start off with Shazam, then we have Blue Beetle, The Flash, and then Aquaman. You have and the Last Kingdom, the sequel to Aquaman.
Yeah.
So you have 4 movies within just the next 18 months that are going to be tied into the same continuity. We have Black Adam coming out this October, and then I think we still have Wonder Woman 3 in development with Patty Jenkins and Gal Gadot coming back. So, you know, they're going to round out that trilogy, which exists all in the same continuity, and they have already announced plans for, you know, possibly like linking up Shazam and Black Adam in a you know, same movie at some point down the road. Peacemaker is getting a season 2, which exists in the same continuity as all of that. And you've got other movies on the deck, hopefully. I mean, I'm hoping. There's rumors of like, you know, maybe Michael Keaton's Batman will be back for more appearances afterward. Maybe Ben Affleck isn't done. So they've got a lot invested, and or maybe they want to do a third Aquaman movie after, you know, the second one. They've got a lot invested in this current version of the iteration of the DCEU. So from that perspective, I'm like, if you can have your cake and eat it too, why not? Like, you can have the Batman universe going. You've already got, like we talked about, you've got at least one, if not possibly 2, if the Gotham PD show ever happens. You got possibly as many as 2 TV shows on HBO Max coming up. You've got a sequel to the movie that just made you a shit ton of money coming up. And there's, you know, with the overall deal that Matt Reeves has, there's no end in sight to the more Batman content in that world.
Yeah.
So why not keep it separate? I mean, what do you think about the idea of just running these 2 universes simultaneously, and you have the Batman sort of doing his own thing and the DCU doing its own thing, which has its own Batman, granted, but the
Yeah.
majority of Batman content we'll get from Warner Brothers will be on the Batman world with Matt Reeves, whereas the DCEU will focus on basically everybody else, and its version of the Batman will kind of show up here and there. Like, do you think that could work?
That is a really brave concept. And I think, I mean, I don't think it can be done. I'm just going to say it. I think it would just be it would just be too confusing for mainly the audience. You know, it would just be, you'd have to find a certain way to like really distinguish them, and like the marketing that has to be like very in your face, because I already know there's going to be so many people that are going to be like, oh, well, is it part of this or is it part of this? universe, because if it's ever expanding, it's ever connecting, then those paths are going to connect. And I don't know, Dan. I'm sorry, I don't know.
Well, they have already been doing that, right? Like this Batman movie came out, and then we obviously have the Black Adam movie coming out later this year. Peacemaker aired not too long after the Batman, or was it airing before? It around the same time. So they've already been doing it. So it's not like this is going to be a new challenge. If anything, they're going to kind of have to continue to do what they have already been doing. So from that perspective, I feel like if the status quo works, then why not continue with it? I mean, what do you think about the idea of um just kind of continuing the way things are? Because obviously they're so
Yeah,
far they've been working. I know some people have been asking questions, but I don't think
yeah.
you can ever get rid of
I
every
definitely understand
question.
what you're saying, but and I guess I'm still kind of just really holding on to the DCEU, and like really holding on to that desperate string of connecting back to Man of Steel, because I always thought that there was so much potential that they could do with that, and they still are technically working with that timeline. But I mean, you're absolutely right. They're connecting the Reeves universe. They're connecting the Todd Phillips universe. They're Joker
Well,
getting a
actually,
sequel.
but the Joker is, oh, that's another thing. So that's completely on its own continuity too. So the Joker movies are like completely separate from what they're doing here.
Yeah,
Heck, I don't even know if the new Constantine sequel that's in development now, I don't even know if that's going to connect to any of these other projects. It might just be another
I don't think it
standalone.
is. I think it's own entity, really,
Yeah.
because that's
So
what that first one was. So
I'm, here's the thing. Like now, let's do a quick hypothetical. So we've talked about the pros and cons of having one or the other, or both at the same time. But
yeah,
if they were to like decide we want to have one continuity and one shared cinematic universe like an MCU where everything is connected and everything is in that one, whether it's a multiverse or whatever concept, but everything connects together. Um, if they were to do something like that, then how do you reconcile like all of the current iteration of the DCU that we've talked about? Like they've got 4 movies on the slate, and if you count Black Adam as part of that upcoming slate, you have 5 movies, one this year, 4 more next year, and then a couple more in development for down the road, at least a couple more. So how do you reconcile that with the Batman? I mean, can you merge those? Do you just kind of say, okay, this is it for the DCU, done? Now we're going with the Batman stuff. Do you take a
yeah.
hiatus and you could just start over with completely fresh? How do you if they wanted to kind of say we want to have everything under one umbrella of story, then how would you even do that?
I would say Flashpoint, but I
Okay.
don't think that they're capable of doing that. And I know that
Well, they
I
are
think Ezra
doing the
Miller was
Flashpoint
really,
storyline in that Flash movie. I don't know how in depth that's gonna go, but
yeah, but I think the plan was always to kind of merge worlds together and show Michael Keaton's Batman and do this and that. So maybe, who knows? Fan theory?
well, they probably. I think the fact that Michael Keaton's back, I think, is almost a confirmation that the Tim Burton verse, if you will, is going to
Yeah,
be brought into the same continuity, if not through a multiverse. I mean, probably it's going to be like it's another multiverse world, and it's not quite the prime continuity like the Earth one of the DCEU. But beyond that, I don't know what other versions of past DC properties they're going to integrate or future, or for all we know, Robert Pattinson shows up in that movie. And you're like, oh, I see where they're going with this, or like, Henry Cavill comes back in Black Adam or in The Flash or Ben
yeah.
Affleck. I mean, we know Ben Affleck's gonna be in that movie as the DCU Batman. I don't, I guess where I'm landing on this whole situation is, can the Batman start a new DCU? I think you and I agree that yes, you could potentially start an entire franchise where you bring in a Superman, you bring in a Wonder Woman, you bring in all the other DC heroes. You could do that in the world of the Batman. However, given that the DCU is, going relatively strong, I mean, I don't think they're in any dire straits. They've obviously, like I said, we have 5 movies coming up. They're at some point of production or being complete, with a few more in development. So it's not like it's a dead franchise that just needs to be tucked away and shelved forever.
Yeah.
So it's maybe it's not a question. Maybe the question isn't could they do it, but should they do it? And if you ask the question, should they do it? I personally think no, because unlike the MCU, the DCEU or Warner Brothers in general and DC Films has something unique here, which is they can have their cake and eat it too. You can get a really badass, grounded, realistic, grimy, and dirty Batman franchise running simultaneously in parallel with like the more fantastical, superpowered DCEU that feels more like what you get from a lot of MCU projects. And you can
Mhm.
still get the Joker and like for Joker 2 Folie à Deux, like, musical, like something so insanely different that I don't know if the MCU can even get away with doing something like that. I mean, maybe they can. I mean, we're getting She-Hulk after all these days, but um even She-Hulk has to tie into everything else within the continuity MCU, so you kind of get limited by what you can do. You sort of have to operate within the confines of a certain environment that you cannot like bust out of. Whereas Joaquin Phoenix and Lady Gaga can do whatever the heck they want without having to worry about how it ties into the Batman or the Black Adam movie. And I think
Yeah.
that's something unique to DC, and they should keep it that way because it's working for them so far. And unless it's all of a sudden goes to shit, why bother changing it? I mean, optimize it further, make it better, take advantage of the flexibility that gives you. That's where I land on the subject. But Roland, do you agree, or do you have a completely different mindset on that?
Uh, I don't know. I'm switching back and forth. So let's ask the fans. Would you rather that the universe connect and build upon itself, or do you think that characters aren't tied to actors and stories aren't tied to certain directors and people can extend and do this and that? So let us know in the comments. Make sure to like and subscribe. Watch our other videos if you're interested in more conversation like this. And yeah, thank you.